Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Elevate Business HC webinar, which is convened in partnership with Hennepin County and the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. We have some great content for you today. I'd like to bring on screen, I'm going to start over, you guys, since it's just me. Hello and welcome to today's Elevate Business HC webinar. We're happy to bring you this program today. Elevate Business HC is a partnership between Hennepin County and the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, designed to provide businesses throughout Hennepin County with access to resources that can help them grow. So today I'm really happy to bring on Maluska and Angie from Hortensia Law and Asian Media Access for our presentation today. So ladies, if you want to come on screen, I'm going to turn it right over to you. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. This is Andres. I'm with Asian Media Access. Maluska, do you want to advance the slides and introduce yourself?
Certainly. And this is Milushka Novoda, and I am with Hortensia PLC. It's a small law firm in Minneapolis.
Can you next, please? So for today's, we're really going to focusing a lot about bicultural healthy living. And we would like to have our audience to better understand why it's so important at this critical moment during the pandemic. And we talk about this bicultural healthy living approach. What is that and how we can apply to our business? And we also want to introduce a new concept about cultural intelligence framework. And I think as a lot of business definitely hear about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And DEI may be a concept. So we will hope is you can apply this cultural intelligence framework into DEI practices, and we'll show you how and show you we will be able to implement all these step by step, and why and how cultural intelligence make a good business sense. Next, please. So, bicultural healthy living approach. Luska, you probably want to hit advance, so you'll have a different animated show up. So before we talk about bicultural healthy living, we hope to explain a little bit about the iceberg concept of culture. We always see the food, the dress, the music, and this is a 1/10 above the water for the iceberg, which is very obvious elements for culture. And we did not see is that beneath 1/9 of the cultural practices, our behaviors, our clan system is invisible beneath the water. So when we talk about this iceberg concept of culture, I hope all of us will practice all the time. When you see the food, the dance, you know that may be a Chinese culture, that may be Mexican culture, but underneath it, a lot of things may not be seen. For example, concept of time. You can see that underneath, no, not yet. Yeah, go back. Yep, the concept of time is really, you can see that bullet point underneath the ship. It's a lot of way to define time. In our Asians, we think the time is circular. So it's always going to come back. So it's always have tomorrow. And in the mainstream setting, it's much more time is money. So time is very linear. So when it's past, it's past. So you have to schedule the meeting. You have to make sure you show up on time. So for example, like Hmong time, we have the party from 2 to 11 p.m. Whenever you show up, you show up. So this concept of time create a lot of problem, particularly for immigrant community. When they miss the meeting, when they don't comprehend, you need to show up on time. So that will create a lot of problems, particularly at the business setting. Would you agree, Maluska?
I do. And in Hispanic community, at least where I grew up, which was a small town in the Andes of South America, it is actually rude to show up in time because the hostess is not going to be ready. And so if one shows up on time, you might find the hostess still in rollers and cleaning the house and doing the final setup of the party. So we are taught to show up at least half an hour late, if not more.
Yes, definitely. And I think that eye contact also is another important thing. For example, in a lot of business setting at the mainstream, they will ask you to see their eye to eye. But in our Asian culture, see eye contact in the business setting is so disrespectful. Would you agree?
Completely, because for me, I very much appreciate eye contact with a close friend or a close family friend, but I definitely have been trained to not start eye contact with somebody I have just met. Whereas, for example, I was in a party with a person of German descent who said that in order to toast, one had to see each other, the people giving the cheer, the toast, needed to see each other in the eyes. And it was exceedingly uncomfortable for me to do that with somebody I had just met. So it wasn't a pleasant experience. It was a somewhat daunting experience.
Yeah. And that's what that eye contact sometimes really create a lot of business barriers. When you give out cash, when they go to the Asian grocery store and you give the monies and people give you change and they're not looking at you, a lot of mainstream people feel that's offensive. So that's what we are talking about, this biculturalism, is how could we starting to comprehend both sides? So there's definitely no right way or wrong way, but there's a different ways to interpret. So biculturalism is not complicated. You already practice it daily. And like Miluska's experience, like your experience go to the Asian grocery store, you practice that every day already. So you allow those two cultures come together. So in the American Indian culture, they really support younger as a little turtle. So you can live on the land, you can live in the sea. So that's two different ways of living style. And in the Chinese ways, we call it yin and yang. So you have the ways to explain the things. For example, watermelon is yin. And then if you drink a hot spicy soup, that's yang. So all these things, they are harmoniously integrated together. And that's what we call biculturalism. Next, please. And we hope you would look into all these different pictures, Miluska.
Yes, I think that biculturalism is not only being aware that one is in a culture and another person is in another culture, but to know that most of our culture has global roots. For example, in Mexico and the US border, one of the most beloved forms of music is norteño music. Interestingly, as you can see, norteño music has accordions and follows a waltz or polka rhythm. And it follows that rhythm because at the time there were many Czech, Austrian, and some German immigrants on northern Mexico. It was also governed by Maximilian, who was of Austrian descent. So when he was briefly emperor of Mexico. And so that music, which is very close to my heart, comes from many different places and can be understood in so many ways, and has such deep and complex roots.
Definitely. And how could we apply those bicultural approach to our business? Let me give you a couple examples. Next, please. This is a complaint from one of their customers. Customers purchase the pho, which is Vietnamese hot noodles, from the store. And the customer is complaining, this is raw. Why this beef is raw? The restaurant owner is lazy. They are not even cooking, or not to mention the health hazard. So restaurant owners need to write this step by step to explain. When you're eating Vietnamese pho, you are putting the hot water into the microwave and heat it up, and then pour all these hot water soup into the bowl with the noodle and the beef there, and beef will be instantly cooked. So that is the process. If you don't have that bicultural thinking, you will maybe at the business side, you're making assumption. People will know, why they order pho, they must know how to eat, what to eat. And then when the business customer side, when you order pho, you probably need to know what is pho and why you have the raw meat come with it. So instead of trying to say you are wrong, but the business owner explained it and really they do step-by-step. Next, please. They do a step-by-step instructions and let you know this is pho. And from the left-hand side, and you can add this raw beef onto your noodle. When you pour more water, the noodle will be well cooked. So this is a bicultural healthy living. We need to really communicate and be able to know that without being sued by your health departments or the customers, and better understand what is pho, we will avoid that conflict. Next, please. And this is a billboard at the North Minneapolis, and it's from the YMCA. So they're trying to say a real people, real fitness. So it's okay if your gym bag is from the grocery store. If this banner show up at the wealthy Edina neighborhood, maybe it's okay because you allow that flexibility. People from different level like different things. But if this banner billboard show up at the North Minneapolis, the poorest neighborhood in Minnesota, you really put a really implicitly racism bias toward the community. You let the community know you are poor, so you come into the gym with the grocery store bag. So this is really one of the bad business example. How could that become so insensitive to place your billboard at the place which is in high poverty rate, and really talking about real people, real fitness. And so we don't deserve gym bag. So we only be able to use its grocery store bag. So this is a bad business practice. And that show you how important bicultural healthy living concept means. Next. So let's talk a little bit about the cultural framework. I think you just saw the iceberg, and that type of information sometimes is hid underneath the iceberg. So we want to challenge people to not thinking about cultural competency. A lot of time, cultural competency people tell me is when I go to Chinese restaurant, I know how to order Chinese food. So that's the competency. So they reach a benchmark. Instead, we want you to think about cultural intelligence, like emotional intelligence, like a lot of cognitive intelligence, EQ, IQ. Now we talk about CQ. So you have that cultural intelligence instead of the cultural competency. You can starting to think about this is a lifelong journey for learning culture and learning from each other. And it's not going to have a benchmark. You reach it, you got it. Why would you agree, Melissa?
I do. And it's partly the same way as a person who speaks English as a second language, how I enjoy learning more English all the time. Today I found 2 words that I didn't know before that I love because I love birds. It's a parliament of owls, and I think it's a charm of goldfinches. And I think it's so beautiful to be able to find new things, and also to not assume that even if we are completely competent in our own culture. Because, for example, I am from South America. I invited some friends to my house, and I had forgotten, because I lived so long here, that in our culture, we offer the guests at least 3 times what we are serving. We bring it to them, and they are expected to say no the first time, no the second one, and at the third invitation to partake, then they might politely say yes and enjoy the food. So when my friends from South America came, I only offered them once and set up the table. And I thought they weren't very hungry. But by the time they were leaving, they were like, can we take some cookies home? And I realized that they had been hungry all the time. And I had failed in my own culture to meet that, that need to offer it to the guest. So we're always learning, and assuming that somebody's not hungry was completely the wrong thing to do.
Thank you so much. Next, please. So that's what we're starting to talk about, our cultural intelligence. We want people to know how you'll be able to encounter with each other. So as what Mariska said beautifully is, we'll continue to just be mindful, and it's continue to asking good questions. So you will get that cultural knowledge, but at the same time, you will able to learn more and every day learn more. Next, please. And we propose this model to you. We want you to starting to think about, definitely at the left-hand side is your commitment from agency, from individual. And then we have you to assess cultural intelligence level from the denial all the way to integration. And we want you to starting to put them into perspective. So you have understand the iceberg 1/10. That's definitely its awareness level. Very simple, very easy. And then we have the shallow one. You probably have the knowledge about the time. You just hear Asian time is defined differently. And then we have that very deep on the water is that skill set. And that's what Mariska is being mentioned. Offer 3 times. That's a general practices in a lot of the South American country. It's also in Asian country too, because you cannot accept the things at the first time. It's just really implied at your business ethics. So that's what we want you to see, that 3 different level and how you can apply those 3 different level to a design principle, which can help you to design your business practice and reflect back to the implementation level, agency and individual, particularly that individual at the number 4 square, you will see the bicultural healthy living. And that's what we want you to start to think about. It's a cultural, but culture really impacting your bottom line. If you don't understand each other's cultures, you may offend your customers. And I will have more example for you for that incidents. So how could we starting to look into much more deeper and be able to starting to incorporate all these into culture integration? Next, please. So we ask all of us to practice this, particularly at your business organization, as your individual as well. And we understand the different cultural dimension, understand the different diverse communication style, and how those style impacting your clients' behaviors. People communicate differently. People has a different way want to purchase things. People have a different cultural dimension. For example, in our Asian culture, it's a group culture. So we purchase things in a group. So when we hear, my mom told me this restaurant is great, I will go with my aunties just to try out. And we have this group culture. We share it. And then if this clothing look good on you, and next day is my sister brought it. So those are the cultural behavior and communication style. When you understand, when you can incorporate those behavior into your business strategy, marketing strategy, you will have a win-win situation. So we're not just talk about the DEI in a concept. We want to diversify. We want to provide equity. We talk about how you can implement it. Next, please. So the level of cultural intelligence, we just see denial all the way to integration. So a lot of time it's when people deny the other culture, they feel their own culture is the most important one, which is a good and strong belief, and which we want to have everyone have their root culture and feel proud of that. But at the same time, we still need to starting to open up. So we go through denial to defend our own culture, minimizing other culture, get to acceptance other culture, adapt into other culture, and finally we can integration both culture. It's a way to a practice you should do every day. And we can starting to think about why we don't like spicy food. And probably you did not grow up in a spicy food families. So, but if you're willing to try, that may be different. So you can starting to think about, maybe I will try one or two, and then you're starting to like it. So accept it, and you're starting to maybe adding spice into your own cooking. So those are integration process. It's just a lifelong learning. So that's why we continue to urge people, don't think about cultural competency, think about cultural intelligence. Next, please. And cultural intelligence has all different ways. So I think we have enjoyed all these different stage of sharing, accepting, adaptation, integration. And we're starting to have this intercultural mindset. And this is so important of this intercultural mindset, because if you do things wrong, you in your culture may not be offensive, but could be offensive to other culture. And I think a lot of time, for example, when I go to the Hmong farmer markets, I see a lot of mainstream people doing this. This is in our Asian culture. You're calling the animal, you're calling the dog, you're doing this. And in the farmer market, you do this to your Hmong farmers. Why can't you just do like this, calling them this way? And this is a much more acceptable way instead of using this, which we understand this is what probably mainstream culture, you always do this. But that's how you become intercultural mindset, is you will starting to think about, is that offensive? Is there any way people may interpret differently? How could we open up asking good questions so we can better understand the other side and reduce that conflict? Next, please. And we hope to introduce you one major concept is that communication. We don't have much time today, so we're focusing only on the high and low context. And the cultural communications really has two definitions. Somebody communicate with a high contact, such as you communicate with all these contact around you. Sometimes would be the low contact. Low contact, you are very linear, straightforward, for example. So whenever we want, in my culture, Asian culture would be more high contact. So I would say, can you give me this? And then I will point it to the salt. So the people in the room will understand, will give me the salt. But a lot of time when I encounter with the low context communication, I would say, can you give me that? I point. They would not understand. They were asking me, what do you want? And I have to say, can you give me the salt? So this is a very different ways of communication. And this type of different way of communication is so easy to have confusions and having all these misunderstanding. So Maluska, would you be able to say that when you offer that cookie the first time and they say no and you shut down, and would that be something related to this high and low context?
Completely, because the no did not mean no. The no meant ask me again, and I will politely say no because I want to go into the flow of the party, because we are not going ABC, we're going, it's more of a lived experience, right? So yeah. The party needs to flow, and that's the goal. The goal is not necessarily eating, being together and staying at a certain time from 1 to 4. It is sharing and getting to know each other in a way that we're comfortable. Yeah. So when somebody comes into your house, it's not comfortable for them to start eating and
right
not
away.
right.
Yeah.
So, but you want to let them know that they are welcome. So the first no is maybe a you're welcome. The second no is take a look at what we have and maybe you'll think about it a little later. And the third no is, oh yes, I will go for that with an offer of somebody, usually a younger person in the family, bringing the dish to every single guest so that they can serve themselves in a comfortable way, as opposed to having a buffet and going to the buffet. We do have buffets in South America, but it's more of the flow of the party.
Yep.
And there is no way anybody would say from 9 to 6 because we expect to stay as long as we want.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is the party. Yeah. And I think you have a very, very good point. Is high contact is we always already pre-programming. Those information are shared. So your guests know you will always ask 3 times, and your children's know they have to really pick up the cookie and really politely asking people to pick it up, regardless they are hungry or not, but that's the host duties. So you have this pre-programmed information and the receivers, and we only need to give you a little information. So you know, we will probably pick it up we'll say no at the first time, because it's when we come in, it's just very impolite to eat right away. And then the second note is not yet. I probably want to fill the rooms and chit chat with others. And then the third time you offer, I will pick it up because that's the right time to pick it up. So those are the things. It's so contact based. So it's not information. It's you and the guests and the cultural background. We all interact together. And I remember when I was young in my Chinese families, when I want something, I always ask my mom. And my mom always has only 2 answers. One is no, or go ask your father. So we would know no, it means no, it's just too expensive. My mom taking that hard answers, and she will explain to us why not. Then when we go to say, ask your father, we'll feel very happy because that means a yes. And then I go ask my father, can I get this? My father will say what your mom said. My mom say asking you. And then my dad will say yes, we can purchase that. So it's a way for a high contact people to operate is we understand the environment, we understand the culture, we understand my mom giving my dad the authority to say good yes. And my mom reserved that no to herself because that's what the cultural, in our culture, the gender role will play. So when you have this high contact, you need those contact information. But at the low contact, contrary, everything is delivered in your communication. So yes is a yes, no is a no. So that's what it creates so much confusion. Maluska, would you say? Because a lot of time, our culture, yes doesn't mean yes, no doesn't mean no. And sometimes yes just means I hear you. So how do we do with that? So how can we help that high contact and low contact starting to better communicate?
I think that that's exactly what is the challenge, right? Because
Yes.
what many people hear is not what a different person from a different culture is saying, and putting a framework of high and low context, because we know we are used to going to a store, for example, and knowing that the price is going to be what the price is. But if we go to a market in South America, the price,
or in Asia.
or in Asia, the price is the opening store. It's not, and so
it's the bargaining part.
Exactly. And I love that we're interrupting each other, because that's another thing that we do very differently in our cultures. Conversation is a mixed thing. I could, like if my friends jump in, it just means that they know what I'm about to say. They have an idea, they want to contribute to it, and I don't need to say it because I've already said it, or it's obvious, or it does not need to be expressed, because it's just a constant. Think about it as when you wake up and you listen to birds chirping. They are all chirping around each other, but they know exactly what they are doing and they are communicating. If I interrupt somebody in a business meeting in Minnesota, it is very often called off as offensive. And I've learned not to do it, but I wish that person knew that if I interrupt somebody, it's because I really want to make sure that they know that I'm with them.
I know, and I hear you. That's exactly what I'm feeling is, particularly when I go into the business, like in Target, I would just make a lot of mistakes. I was asking the sales clerk, hey, do you like this skirts on me? And they are so offended. But then this is such a practices we have in our Asian countries. We just really having that interacting conversational with stranger as well. Stranger will say, this is good, buy it now. So all these are really in a different context. Next, please. So why we talk about this in the business setting? It's really related to your bottom line. So in this one, you have people tired, drink the Coke, you energize again. Very good marketing, and you will know I will buy the Coke when I feel tired. But in Chinese culture, in the Arabic culture, we really read from right to left. So you are very energetic, you're running, and you drink Coke, you die. So this marketing strategy is not working for our culture. So that's what is so important when you have this business practices, you take culture into consideration. Next, please. And you have to starting to think about what would be a better way to communicate with a high contact community and low contact community. So high contact community, Asian, French, Spanish, Greek, we all in this high contact, which means we communicate not from A to B to C, maybe A jump to D, come back to A later. But in a lot of mainstream culture, it's such as with Swiss, Scandinavian, German, mainstream USA culture, they are based on information. They based on the content. So that's why very logic way from A to B to C. So it's a very easy, very clear communication. So in the high contact, you will see it's A, go through all these different things and finally get to B. So you're starting with a big point and you kind of looping in gradually and you finally get to point. So, and instead in the low contact, it's very straightforward, A to B, very logic. So when these two communication clash, like what Maluska has been talking about, a lot of times our business setting, your clients will go through all this swirl. They'll talk to you in the big picture. They're providing that background information to you. And you were asking, can you get to the point? And that's very insulting to me. Would you say that, Maluska?
Yes, and it's very difficult to do because, for example, as a lawyer, I need to get facts and I need to get those facts conveyed in a certain way to either somebody who's financing a business or to a judge in order to make a decision. So I really need those facts. However, and I have made this mistake, I just say, because I want those facts in an orderly way, I want my clients to give me those facts in an orderly way. But that is not their communication process. So what I need to do is know what facts I need to gather and expect to gather them not in a question and answer session,
Exactly.
but in a conversation.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
you were saying. Mhm.
Yeah. And when you say that conversations, it really is when they provide that background, you will pick it up, or your social security number is this one. And then you will pick it up, or you talk about the North Minneapolis, actually that lead to your business address. So those are the things we starting to practice as a bicultural healthy living, because that's make a good business sense.
Indeed. And I think that I have, and I need to go and apologize to this client where, for example, they were giving me much more information that may not have been relevant to that particular question that I have, but that was exceedingly relevant to them as clients and to their business. Because
Yes.
when they are, when we are, and what they really want, right? Because
Yes.
if a person is giving me information in a very emotional way, it is exceedingly difficult for me, because I grew up with a very logical father, to say, focus on the facts. And that is very insulting, because that person is telling you what it means to them to do this for their business. Facts really don't matter that much. And so it's very good to get from that framework outside of
Yes.
these matters, and the relationship matters. And frankly, it's great for business, because if a person thinks that you understand where they want to go, then they are more likely to refer their friends. If they think they are rude, they will take your service and move on. And they would not want their family to come to you, because they expect you to treat them badly.
And they will not tell you that.
Oh,
You
no.
were just
Oh,
wondering why they never come back.
no. Mm-hmm.
Yes. We only have a limited time, so let's jump. Let's go to the slides. Let's jump a little bit, go to, yep, how to apply. Yep, let's talk a little bit. I think this cases is a very traditional Asian and African American cultural clash case. This Korean store owner, unfortunately beaten up by two African American customers, and they do receive their punishment. And at the end, the Korean's restaurant owner trying to put things into perspective. And they keep saying things like, oh, I know we never have this problem. This is just single incidents. So they did not realize one of the key trigger points is because the Asian store owner continue following them while they are shopping. So that's what they push her down. And this is a microaggression in a lot of Asian American business owner at grocery stores, at retail stores. They have these misconceptions about African American customers. And they do this by instinct. They did not questioning their act may be a racist act. So, and that's what she followed them. And that's what they have the opportunity to push her, beat her up, because she is next to them. So all these difficult incidents, our own community, Asian American business owners, has to starting to really think about our own racist acts, such as following your customer. And I have a lot of local Asian grocery store. They take pictures of those suspect. They are not caught them. They suspect the theft. They posting on their grocery store doorway. And it's a very racist and very offensive act from our business community. So that's what we are putting this bicultural healthy living together. We want our business to know. A lot of time they may not be aware in our Asian culture, following someone is a good business sense, because when I talk, remember that target example, I give it to you, Melissa. We're asking those opinions. We're asking those store owners, is this good on me? How much is this one? Although the price is right on there. But by interacting with your customer, by following them while they're shopping, and it's a good experience because you starting to chit chat with them. Where's your mom? Why they didn't come today? And last time you brought this, do you still need more? It's about a month already. So this is why they following customer is a good business practice in Asian countries, but it's interpreted as microaggression at American society, which I think we as Asian American community, we should start talk about all these. So all these cultural implication may turn into some of the racist act in the mainstream community perspective and from other culture perspective, and we may never understand. And this is the time we talk about why and how we can starting open up communication and really having that cultural communication. Well, would you agree, Melissa?
Definitely, Angie. As you said, there's definitely racism in our communities, and we need to fight that very strongly. But there's also a way in which we don't have to jump into conflict when we don't understand something and when we can be respectful about something. For example, we were working with a client who was transgender during a very long process in which the client began the process as a man and ended the process as a woman. And so the paralegal in charge of that case was one of the strongest advocates of this trans person. And she really, really, really liked that trans person and was always coming to my office and saying, Miluska, you have to focus on this case. Miluska, you have to do this. Miluska, you have to do that. And don't come back if you haven't gotten this for our client. So she was really advocating for that trans person. But because she's from a generation, or just because it was her, or just because of the way she grew up, she had enormous trouble with the correct name and the correct pronouns.
That's me too.
Exactly, and me too sometimes. And it was just, I could see her starting the call, concentrating and saying, I am going to use the right pronouns. And she would start the call, and by midway, she was so into the process that she remembered the image of the person that she saw at the beginning of the process, and she talked to that person. And I wonder whether the client felt offended by a person who cared so much about their well-being, mm-hmm. and how we could navigate that process, and also not assume that somebody is against us, but maybe ask questions before jumping into conflict. And
yeah,
you were saying something about learning more about what the other person is thinking and the other. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was totally agree. Like in Chinese, we don't have those he, she, they, those pronouns. So that's what it's always, I'm making all those mistakes. So, but if you understand more of the different cultural background, you will see her effort. And you will see her in context, because in her culture, in her background, he may not get used to do those kind of pronunciation. And so you will be more understanding, acceptable, and won't feel offensive. And I think those are the things we have to continue to encourage people asking good questions. And I think that is one of the good practice we want people to know. And if we get to the next slides, and I think we should be able to get through very quickly. And I want people to starting to think about all these. You know, it's not just about what the language coming out. It's really put things into context. The language, their cultural identity, family roles, like what I saying, like mother and father playing different roles in our Asian cultural families, and the way of their communication, high and low contact, and the worldview. And that's what, like in my culture, we called everyone auntie, uncle, regardless what. And so when we are in when I'm doing the outreach, and I will see all these people, and they are coming with families, and will say, hey, that dad, hey, that mom, instead of to really be able to grab their attention, and uncle, auntie, I was really using that name. But then the mainstream community feels so odd, because in some way I calling everybody mom and dad, and I calling everybody uncle, I calling everybody, hey, my sister, little kid. So all these are coming into play in this bicultural setting. So how could we be able to think broader is really key. Next, please. And also be responsive. And I think in that business relationship, particularly when, Mariska, you mentioned that trans persons maybe get so offensive and just left, but really lost a good services you guys can provide, because you really consider as a comprehensive approach, and the individual is considered a very linear approach. So how could we be able to respond to each other? I think that's really is the key. And I was thinking also, it's important, for example, that workforce composition and quality, it's also, that's what is diversity coming. If we have more diverse staff, if we have more diverse customer, you still have that opportunity to interact. So you would be able to incorporate those cultural and different beliefs into your business practice as well.
Yeah, and also understand, because, for example, I think that seeing how difficult it was for somebody who, the thing is that with the example with the pronouns, I think that we have to be exceedingly careful about pronouns. And I think that we must follow the pronouns that each person defines for that specific person. So what I absolutely work very, very hard on that. And this paralegal was working very, very hard on that, but her framework was a little, her framework and her practices gave her a teeny little bit more challenges in getting that done. However, it was very helpful, because we both, by going through that process of not understanding fully, knowing that we need to work on that and learn more about that, it was very helpful, because when we presented her case, we also got a lot of backflow from the people who were going to make the decision. But since the team had already been grappling with that need to learn more, understand more, and respect more, we were able to present the case in a way in which we did get a very good result for the client, because we had already gone through the process that this person that we were presented was going at the time. So it's tough, but I think that learning the process itself can be frustrating, but we have to do it, because hopefully it's so interesting and so worthwhile that not doing is just wasting a wonderful opportunity to learn and be respectful to another human being. So I think it's exceedingly important to just get it done.
And that's what that integrated portion is so important, because I feel we cannot just do a linear approach or circular approach. It's not either or. It's really starting to integrate and starting to consider the context. So because we are so interdependency now. So I think particularly the pandemic let us see this. The business, you are not just a business anymore. You are integrated into this society. If society has this outbreak, it's impacting on you. And also it's your customer change their shopping behaviors now. They do more drive-through. So you have to improve your websites and be able to having that automations wait to support your customer better instead of expecting them come to your restaurant, for example. And I think all these are really a layer as what you're saying, but it's worth a while. We need to think about that. And it's definitely have to integrate into business structure, practices, and also starting to talk with your customer. What would be your multicultural customer behaviors? And that's really is going to be so different. And I think it's really fun as well, because now we are talking about really individualized services. So it's not just a group services anymore. You really also need to think about individualized services. And that's what it's the beauty of that DEI concept, really diversity, equity, inclusion is so important. And we talk about that integration, and asking questions would be the first one. I think that's something we all have to practice. Next, please. And I think we're starting to think things differently. Just be open and understand it's going to be on a multiple perspective. You don't need to agree on one or the other, but you need to understand one or the other. So you can starting to say, yes, I may not be able to open up my business, or I can still schedule people, and I schedule people in the way which they may feel comfortable. We encourage them to come to 2 to 4 instead of 2. But with that, they have to understand maybe they have to wait when they show up. So 2 to 4, you can schedule them, but people come in different time and they can understand they need to wait. But waiting, that concept is acceptable for our culture. So you won't be able to say, if you say 2 o'clock and don't be late, or 2 to 4, come when you can. And that serves a very different purpose. So the other receiver end starting to understand, yes, I will be able to see my doctor 2 o'clock sharp, but if we do 2 to 4, I have more flexibility. He has more flexibility, but I may need to wait. So all these understanding will come in, become a good business sense to all of us. So we're not just serving one type of person anymore, or one type of culture. We are serving a multicultural customer basis now. Next, please. So some final words. We only have 3 minutes left. So Luzca, we made it, but I will hope is our business owners starting to accepting some of the ambiguity, something you may not understand, but you definitely respect, and asking good questions. So you understand A may not lead to B, may not lead to C. You accepting that ambiguity, and you starting to communicate, ask good question, incorporate that education into your business.
And we had an example of something that the Minneapolis Institute of Art did very, very well, which was they created a space where a culture could communicate with other cultures and celebrate its own. And I think that one of the examples that we have here is this piece of shoes from Louboutin with Jamie Okuma, adapted with quill work and beadwork into something, as you can see, very fashionable and just a beautiful play into so many traditions.
Yes, definitely.
And my favorite example, because I learned that this is a great way to communicate.
And you won't believe all the Chinese restaurants combined together over exceeding all the fast food, McDonald's, Wendy adding together. So we talk about this is every town will have a Chinese restaurant. And so you can see how demand that would be for Chinese restaurant workers. A lot of them will come directly from China and they may not speak English. And that's exactly what happened at the Chinatown, New York. When they first arrived in the terminal, they got shipped to Chinatown, and Chinatown will dispatch all these large group of Chinese workers into different state and city, and they will not speak fluent English. So instead of calling New York, calling Virginia, calling Tennessee, all these different things, they use area code. They're using the number and they write down the number, and the driver call each stop instead of New York, but they calling 304. So they can have a better understanding. They can be able to communicate and integrate at the level the immigrant worker can comprehend, so they can arrive safely. So this really talk a lot of things about bicultural healthy living. Sorry, Christine, we have a long discussion, but we have a very good discussion. We did not get a chance to invite all the participants and you to join us. We really apologize, but we have a very good conversation.
I think this is absolutely excellent content, so please don't apologize. I appreciate it so much. So thank you to you both. I love just your interaction and your sharing. I think that's just so beneficial. And thank you for having your contact information here. I want to thank everyone who attended today. Elevate
Next
Business
slide,
HC.
please.
Oh, thanks. Elevate Business HC continues to be a resource for businesses in Hennepin County and nonprofits as well. Both Angie and Maluska are available to help serve you if that's of your interest to you. And with that, we will log off for the day. Thanks you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.